Oh, I should look at the camera that's actually up there. Um, Thanks so much for joining us. You're in Vienna, aren't you?
Yes.
And yeah, so thanks so much for coming. And I right now don't actually have access to a title of your talk, so maybe you want to share the screen and then take it away from there. And hang on, I will. And we are recording.
Yes.
Terrific. So, um, yeah, over to you, Christina.
Great. Thank you so much for this invitation. I'm so excited that so many of you want to engage with my research. So hi, my name is Christina. I'm a PhD candidate at Humboldt University in Berlin. I think it's the last time saying this because I'm defending next week. And I'm also a research fellow at the University of Vienna, where I also will start a postdoc in March. And today I will introduce it to part of my dissertation research. And I gave this talk the title, The Perfect Fit, Evaluating the Success and Visibility of Targeted and Tailored Political Social Media Ads. Okay, so I started this project with the idea that there is a growing number of late deciders and volatile voters, and voters really receive a lot of information nowadays during election campaigns, which makes it much harder to get attention from voters. And this is why parties have modernized their communication strategies in recent years. And there was also a huge shift of campaign budgets from traditional media to advertising on social media platforms. And for all of these ads on social media platforms, parties need to decide which audiences they want to reach, which is targeting, and which content their ad should be about, which is tailoring. And I will talk about these two concepts more in detail, but this is like the main distinction here. And there has been this kind of myth of targeted and tailored political advertising, a lot of news media stating that this is really bad for democracy and it shifts election campaigns. Because parties are expected to collect highly personal information and then use this to manipulate voters and therefore influence elections. In this context, there's always this discussion that targeting can lead to a threat of democratic principles because of privacy concerns. You can spread around misleading content. Parties can focus only on very specific voters. And also this kind of angle that this might shift competition and this makes it unfair, and also that platforms like Meta and Google will gain a lot of influence on elections because of that. I guess you've all heard of the Facebook Cambridge Analytica scandal from the US, and there was like this huge journalistic coverage of it. And this has really led to this myth of targeting and tailoring in election campaigns. But this really nice article shows that this really did not rely on empirical investigations. It was just journalistic coverage, but it has not really been shown that this had a huge impact. And this is what we are trying to do in this talk. So we want to evaluate the success and visibility of targeted and tailored political social media ads. In a first step, I will define and show you how I measure targeting and tailoring as independent strategies. And then we will evaluate the success and the visibility empirically. I do this in two papers. The first one is experimental evidence and has recently been published. And the second one is ongoing work with Simon Groszinski. And I'm really looking forward to your feedback there. In total, I show that targeting and tailoring work when they are used lightly, but there's really no advantage of targeting or tailoring messages very specifically to voters. Okay, let's start with the definition. What is targeting and tailoring? Targeting is the strategy to send a specific message to a particular subgroup or individual members of the electorate, which we often call target group. In contrast, tailoring is the strategy to adapt the content of the message to this specific target group. So when we talk about ads or messages, we can apply these definitions as well. So a targeted message is a message that was sent to a specific target group, and a tailored message is a message whose content explicitly addresses a particular subgroup or individual members or their interests. Okay, and I will show you some examples now because this not always goes hand in hand. So this is an ad from the German SPD from the 2021 election campaign, and the translation reads as every third woman benefits from a minimum wage of 12 euros. And we see in the metadata that the SPD only selected women as a target group for this ad. So they targeted this ad to women. We can also say that this ad was tailored to women because the content clearly speaks to women as a group. On the other hand, you see an ad here from the German Greens, which is a very generic climate change ad, and I wouldn't consider it tailored to women. But we also see in the data that this was still targeted only to women. So you can see here that parties sometimes target ads to specific subgroups without tailoring the content to these groups. And lastly, this is an ad by the German AfD, which is clearly tailored to women. It states why women should vote for the AfD and talks about gender equality positions. But we also see in the data that this was not targeted to women. It was sent to all genders. So here you can really see that these two strategies need to be measured separately from each other. And when you kind of want to put this in a table, you get this nice 2x2 that all messages can be tailored or not tailored to a specific target group, or targeted and not targeted to a specific target group. And this is what I kind of use through my whole research. Okay. I also want to state that sometimes parties combine various targeting and tailoring criteria. We have only talked about women now, for example, but they can also target younger women or older women or younger women who live in Berlin. And they do that. So this is an ad from this campaign, from the AfD, and we see in the data that this ad about going home at night and feeling unsafe was only targeted to young or middle-aged women who live in 8 specific regions and who are interested in some issues such as domestic issues, immigration issues, and cultural issues. So they combine these different criteria quite a lot, and this is also what we need to take into account in our research. I also have another graph to convince you that they combine these different criteria. This is spending data in the German election campaign, and you see on the x-axis how many targeting criteria they used for specific ads, and on the y-axis how much they spent on these ads. So yes, the majority of ads, they only target to one thing. So for example, only on location here in light blue, but they have about like over 30% of the spending goes to ads that are actually targeted to more than one criterion. And this is why I argue that research so far, which mostly focused on only one criterion, has kind of not taken this into consideration. Okay. Just the last 2 wordings I use here, I measure this combination with the wording of targeting degree, which is the amount of targeting criteria used to send a specific message to a target group, and tailoring degree, which is the amount of tailoring criteria used to adapt the content to the target group. Okay. Lastly, we want to measure the effects of these 2 strategies, and for that we have to kind of think about what's actually success in this context, right? What makes a message successful or effective? And I build my argument here on the campaign effect literature, which says that a political message is successful if it has a positive effect on voting intentions for the sending party. When you want to study this on the voter level, that's quite straightforward because you just ask voters if they will vote for the party, right? But if you want to test this on a social media platform, for example, it gets more difficult because you get ads, you get some metrics, but what do you do with those? And in our paper, in the second one especially, we use the concept of impressions or the data of impressions, so how many possible voters have seen the ad. We argue that reaching voters is a necessary precondition for actually mobilizing and persuading them. And also there are some studies that the number of received ads influences the propensity to vote for the sender of the ads, which then ties back to this voter level definition. Of course, other measures would be great. We would like to have click-through rates or interactions or something like that. But at the moment, Meta doesn't give us this information. So this is kind of which we have to do for now. But I hope we can also discuss this. But I hope that future studies can take this into account. Okay. Okay, so just a little bit of theory. Why should tailoring be effective or successful? The assumption here is that a tailored ad should be more interesting and relevant to the voter than a non-tailored ad because it speaks to one of your characteristics, right? Studies have shown this, so tailored ads are more supported and it increases attention, but evidence is quite mixed and also depends on the context. So for example, which sender sent the ad, or is it justified, and so on. In political ads, there were quite a lot of studies that showed positive effects for specific criteria. So gender tailoring, with cues on religion, cues on your most important issue, but also some studies showed null or backlash effects. In my research, I kind of argue that all of these studies always focused on one targeting criterion versus none at all. So very generic ads versus tailoring into your gender, for example. And this key gap is that no political study tests the effect of multiple tailoring criteria at once. My argument is that it could be a non-linear effect, right? If you get a tailored ad that is only tailored to one of your characteristics, it might be more interesting to you. But if you get a very specific ad and it seems like the party knows where you live and knows what you like to eat or whatever, it can kind of get creepy and it's not really credible anymore, and this could lead to a backlash. Okay, for targeting, it's similar, right? Targeting optimizes the ad visibility and influences vote choice because you send ads to those groups that should be most influenced by those ads. For example, you send ads to first-time voters, right? They should be quite effective. There are some studies on this, some find little to no effects, others report positive effects, and again, it's not really clear. Again, there's no study that tested these multiple targeting criteria at once, so I have the same argument here that maybe it works if you target like women, but maybe it doesn't work if you target young women who live in Berlin, right? And these are the two main research questions from the study. So which tailoring degree and which targeting degree makes a political message most successful? And I will show you this now in two papers. On the first one, I have experimental evidence for the tailoring. And in the second one, we have observational evidence on targeting and tailoring in a real election campaign. Okay. So let's go to the second step. Let's go to a specific paper. This paper is called "How Much Targeting is Too Much? Voters' Backlash on Highly Tailored Campaign Messages." Just a small recap and a little bit more detail. Why do we expect tailored ads to be more influencing a vote choice, basically. If I get a tailored ad, it should be more interesting to me because it's somehow tailored to my specific information. However, there are privacy concerns. If parties know very much about me, I might not like it. I could perceive the ad as less credible because I perceive they only send me this because I want to hear that. And also there are studies that show that sometimes parties do better if they don't say much at all, because then voters just imagine whatever they want the party to think. Exactly. So I put my hypothesis as a plot here, and on the x-axis you can see the degree of tailoring, so how many criteria the ad is tailored to you, and on the y-axis you see the success, and I focus here on the solid line, which is the backlash effect, which is a little bit tailoring works. So if I get an ad only tailored to my gender, it's fine. But if it gets very specific to me, I might not like it and I might punish it. This is the hypothesis I expected here. The other two are kind of counteracting. The linear one is just, well, the more is always better. And the diminishing returns is kind of the positive still outweigh the negative effect. Okay, so how did I test this? I ran a pre-registered factorial survey experiment in July, August 2021 in Germany, which was a few weeks before the election. And I used the German voting age population, about 3,200 respondents. And each respondent got 5 different campaign messages that differed in their tailoring degree. After seeing the ads, I asked them the propensity to vote for the sending party and how much they liked the ad. And it's a 2 by 2 by 2 by 2 full factorial design. So I had 4 different conditions. The first one was if the ad was tailored to the respondent's most important issue and their position on the issue or not. The second one was if the ad was tailored to the respondent's gender or not. And I will show you some example in a minute. The third one was if the ad was tailored to the respondent's region or like Bundesland, federal state here or not. And the last one, I actually manipulated if I told them that the ad was tailored to them or not, with like a little label. So also I was able to control for this. And the tailoring degree variable was just an index based on these 3 different conditions, right, where I manipulated the content of the ad. Okay. So I varied this by the main slogan, which I used for the issue, and the subtitle, which was gender and region. And the very generic first ad, which we can also see as kind of a control condition because it was the same for everybody, was just an ad that said, shape the future, we stand up for everybody. Maybe just to say this was actually in color, but in the paper it's like this, so I put it in the slides like this. Okay, and then depending on the respondent, they got tailored ads to them. So if the respondent was a man, they got a different subtitle, we stand up for men, compared to if the respondent was a woman, they got we stand up for women, obviously in German, and it was very close to some slogans going around during the campaign. In the second step, they can get 2 criteria tailored, and in the third step, they can get 3 criteria tailored. Obviously, that's not all ads possible. I had 4 different issues, we had different regions, and so on. It's just like 2 example respondents. These 2 respondents all are right on the immigration, both are right on the immigration issue, and both live in Berlin, but one of them is a woman and one of them is a man. And these are the ads they would have seen. Okay. So what's the result? Is there a risk of too much tailoring? And I show yes, that this is the case. You see here predicted probability values for liking the ad on the left side and the propensity to vote for the party on the right-hand side. And you see that this first criterion, comparing it to not being tailored at all, has a positive effect for liking. It's a null effect for propensity to vote, but then it goes down. So making the ad very specific to the respondent actually has a negative effect. And I think this is kind of the case why all of these studies find different results, because some of them make the ads very specific, others make it more broad when they test this. And if you have a U shape, it kind of depends where you land, right? If you get an effect or not in the model. Okay. In general, these results hold across issues, across types. The only thing where we see different effects is gender. So when you see here on the top panel, this is only comparing gender tailoring versus no tailoring. And you see the woman, which is like the triangle one, they have a positive effect like expected. If it's only tailored to gender, then it's a positive effect. But male respondents actually already backlash here. So male respondents just don't like to be tailored on their gender. I think it's also just not as common. So this is kind of what we see in this data, but nevertheless, I show it's never good to tailor very specific ads to different respondents. So this is just a sensitivity analysis. We can talk about this later. I just wanted to show this one kind of sub-result here. Okay, so we have a clear evidence for the backlash effect, and tailoring is successful if it's used in a low degree in most cases, but respondents punish parties if they are tailored in too many criteria. Results hold for all tested tailored criteria across issues and regions, but male respondents punish parties, especially for gender tailoring. We don't find a significant difference, and also why I didn't show this, if they knew that the message was tailored to them or not. And I have some open questions from a pre-test, and they really speak to this credibility mechanism. Like they really feel like this was only done for me, and the party doesn't even believe that, basically. Okay. Some contributions and limitations. I think I show in this paper that future studies should take combining various criteria at once into account. And I show that there is a backlash effect on high tailoring. Voters seem to recognize if tailoring is used too much and punish parties for it. However, of course, this is only one survey experiment. So if you want to test more internal validity, we need more survey experiments. And we can do different ones. Just some suggestions. I think future studies should test the mechanisms behind this penalty a little bit more. So is it really this manipulation or not? In terms of design, I would do more or other tailoring criteria, maybe use less obvious tailoring by using pictures instead of slogans, for example. And of course, you could try to add party cues, but this was not really feasible a few weeks before the elections in terms of ethics. Of course, you can use other countries or contexts, but in terms of external validity, we wanted to also test this in a real election campaign. And this is what I did in the next paper here, which I will show you now. Okay. Again, this is ongoing work, so we are really open to all feedback. And this is joint work with Simon Kroschinski from the University of Mainz. And we tried to evaluate the visibility of social media ads here. Okay. So why should targeting and tailoring make ads more visible on social media platforms? Our assumption in general on this paper is that parties need to distribute resources strategically and try to invest in those ads that then reach the most people, right? They have a certain amount of money in the campaign, they have to allocate it, and they try to make the message to have more impressions. And targeting can help them to do that because then they can select the most relevant audience for the ad. And tailoring can help them to do that because they make the message more interesting. Of course, it would work best in our argument if both work together, right? The ad I showed you first from the SPD that both targets and tailored to women. We derived these expectations based on communication science, group appeal literature, and issue competition in political science, and have kind of 3 specific research questions, a little bit more exploratory. So how many targeting or tailoring criteria make an ad receive most impressions? And is there a backlash effect for highly targeted ads? How many, this should only say targeting ones and tailoring the others. So we do both basically. And the third one is when we match those, right? If we match targeting and tailoring, does this have a positive effect basically? Okay. So how did we do this? We have all 4,200 ads of parties and top candidates in the German national election campaign from 2021. We have access to the meta ad targeting dataset, which you can get as an academic, which gives you for all ads which target groups the parties selected for those ads. And we did a manual content analysis of these ads. Our dependent variable is impressions, and maybe some of you know this kind of data. It's always in ranges and it has like weird distributions. We can talk about this more, but we basically always take the mean of these ranges, and then we have a truncated Poisson model because our lowest value is 500 here. Our independent variables are targeting, tailoring, and matching. I will show you an example how we derive this in a minute. And we basically have two indexes again, ranging from not targeted all to targeted on 4 different criteria. We control for the cost of the ad, which account sent the ad, the estimated audience size, and this is really important because Meta provides a range how many people you could reach with the ad based on your spending and based on the target group you selected. And we control for this because it obviously also influences how many impressions you can get. We also coded other ad content like negativity, for example, here. Okay. So how did we get these values? And you maybe already noticed this ad. This is how we did it. We had these 4 main criteria, and we used the meta ad targeting data set to measure how many of these 4 criteria were used to target these ads. And we did a manual content analysis where we also measured how many of these criteria were tailored in these ads. And then in this case, for example, they were targeted to all 4 criteria. This ad was tailored to 2 criteria, and 2 of them also matched, which is how we got the last value in our dataset. Okay, so just some descriptives, at least in Germany in 2021, parties really don't use it as much as we all think they are. Most ads are only targeted in 1 criterion, a little bit more, a little bit like around, I think 700 of them are targeted in more than 1 criterion. For tailoring, it's the same. Most of them just do very basic adaptation of messages here. And on the bottom, you see how many of them matched. So how often do they, for example, target and tailor women in one of the same ads? And out of our 4,200 ads, we only have about 470 where they match targeting and tailoring. And I think this is already an important result where we show we should really disentangle these 2. We should not assume just because they target women that all of these ads are also tailored to women, for example. Okay. So what about the visibility? Now we see the predicted number of impressions by targeting and tailoring. And on the left-hand side, you see the targeting, the amount of criteria targeted on the x-axis. And you kind of notice maybe that it's similar like the experiment for tailoring. So first there's a positive effect. So targeting very broad groups on one criterion increases the number of impressions, but it doesn't help if you target very specifically to very small groups here. For tailoring, interestingly, we don't see any effect on the impressions in this real election campaign. So we don't see that ads tailored to specific groups or issues are more successful than non-tailored ads. For matching, it's a little bit hard to do this analysis because the German parties just didn't use it a lot. So the confidence intervals are quite large. It seems to have a positive effect, but I would say that we really need more data to do this. And we are currently in the process of collecting also data for the snap election in 2025. So hopefully we can add this in future versions of the paper and then kind of have this result a little bit more robust. Okay. So some limitations and the venues of future research. As I said, this is only one country and only one election. So we try to add more at the moment. Also, we use very explicit tailoring in our coding because it's not so easy to code if an ad was tailored to young people, for example. Like you cannot always know the intentions of parties, right? So I think there is also some way to improve this here, and this is definitely kind of in progress. As I told you before, the impressions as dependent variable is not like it's fair, I think, but it would be great if we got more data from all of these platforms. So this is kind of a limitation as well. And maybe some implications. We show that political targeting and tailoring do not go hand in hand. They're not always used at the same time. And also that parties do not use them very sophisticatedly yet. In terms of success, we show that targeting helps parties to reach relevant groups that are quite broad. For example, everybody who lives in Berlin. But there is no evidence of higher visibility of very manipulative messages here. So to conclude, I think, and I hope I convinced you that we should take targeting and tailoring as two distinct concepts and also measure them independently in the future. And I've shown that voters seem to appreciate low levels of tailoring, but also recognize quite manipulative messages and punish parties for it. And targeting and tailoring work when used lightly in real campaigns, but there's no advantage of targeting or tailoring messages to a very high degree. I think this leaves us with a relative positive stance in a normative debate about whether targeted and tailored messages threaten democracy, because voters recognize it and parties don't even use it that much, at least not in Germany a few years ago. So I think that the threat of targeting and tailoring is not as big as often feared. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm looking forward to all comments.
Okay, thank you, Christina. Terrific. So, yeah, very interesting data and stimulating talk. We have plenty of time for questions, and yeah, let's go through them in order. Simon, why don't you start?
Thank you. That was a fantastic talk. Very interesting indeed. I have a couple of questions. The first you may well have answered already, but if you did, I missed it, which is, were your ads and issues real life? In other words, did they correspond to a real political party and real issues of the day?
In the experiment, you mean?
Yes.
Should I answer directly? Can I answer?
Yeah,
directly?
you might as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the issues were the four most important issues of the campaign at the moment. It was like environment, housing, immigration, and economy. But there were no party labels. We didn't get ethical approval for this. It was just like no party from the ads.
So did you have to use a fictional party name then, just to kind of so that you could brand the ads properly? Or am I misunderstanding how it worked?
I think in the survey it just said very generic. Imagine you see this ad from a political party during the campaign.
Cool.
It was no like fake name or something like that.
Cool. And the other question is you mentioned that male respondents punish parties for gender targeting particularly, and I just found that really interesting. I was wondering do you have an example of the type of thing you're talking about in that context?
Yeah, I think I can just maybe show this again. It's in this design we had to find, or I had to find ads that worked for all respondents, right? Because you need to being able to manipulate them for all of them. So in the end, I settled for gender. I don't know if it was smart, but like I thought it's maybe better than age because making it very specific that you are young, old, or middle-aged might not be too nice. So in the end, I thought using gender is a little bit better. So you see here that for male respondents, they got this subtitle, "We Stand Up for Men." And the woman got "We Stand Up for Women," and the woman liked it, but the man didn't like that. So this was kind of the backlash I was showing in the results. So this generic ad was comparing like this ad, "We Stand Up for Women," to the generic one. This one was better. But comparing this for the male version to the no criteria tailored, they punished, like they didn't like this one, comparing. Like they like the generic one more, basically. So this is the gender difference we see here. But we also have ads on one criterion tailored, that's, for example, Berlin, right? Where you would only see "We stand up for people in Berlin" without being gendered, and that is positive for all respondents. So it's only the gender aspect that male respondents didn't like, basically.
Do you have any view as to why you think that was, why the men didn't like the "We Stand Up for Men"?
Yeah, I think it's we got some open responses on that they kind of inferred ideology with it, right?
Yeah, sure.
And also that it's just not as common. Like we also see this in the other data set. We have ads tailored to women by parties, but we didn't find any ad that was so explicitly tailored to men. It was a little bit more implicit by showing men in the background or showing cars or whatever, but it was never like as obvious with a slogan. So I think not being used to it and inferring in ideology with it, basically.
That's very interesting. Thank you.
Okay, Dawn.
Yeah, thank you. And yeah, that's a perfect slide actually, because I think you just answered my question, which was whether you always went in that order or if some of them might have been just, for example, stop immigration. Is that I wanted to ask
Yeah.
that clarification.
So all of them was random, right? They could have also gotten this one last. So every respondent had a pool of 16 possible ads on all combinations, and then I randomly selected 5 of them in the random order. That was the manipulation.
And so my follow-on question is that did you know anything about the participants' own views? So I think building on Simon's example, for example, some men can be feminist as well, for instance. So did you already know they were men and kind of predisposed to things that are targeted at sort of like because standing up for men is sort of like putting men as a special category, and some men definitely don't view it that way. Because in that case, it's misaligned
So
and
I
targeted.
didn't ask feminist attitudes. I obviously knew that they're men. Like all of these questions I asked before, and then we did something else in between, so it doesn't make it that obvious. But yes, I mean, I knew for these two respondents, for example, I knew that they were against immigration. So it was always fitting their own views, right? But no, for men, I just knew that they self-classify as men. I don't know if they were feminist or not. I have like a left-right thing and I controlled for that, but don't have specific feminism control here for, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, Fabio.
Thanks a lot, Christina. No, I have a clarifying question on that slide that you had before. But I'm sorry if you said that already and I missed it. So just to make my mind clear. So when you tailored by one criterion, the criterion was always the same?
No.
Okay, so you
So
made this
in
rotate.
this one, it's gender now. It could also
Okay. So that,
yeah.
yeah, because then my follow-up would have been like, don't you think that maybe different criteria have different weights? Like you can, yeah, okay. But so if you rotate it, then that's fine.
Yeah, so here you see, for example, only issue versus no tailoring has a positive effect, right? Again, this is all in sensitivity, but yes, I did it for all three options.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I missed that. So.
Yeah.
And Konstantinos. And then I'll have a few questions too.
Hello, thank you for this great talk. So I have two questions. The first one would be, in study 2, did you find a difference across parties in the sophistication of tailoring and targeting? Like, did you analyze each party's advertisement separately and find like different sophistication levels? And then the second would be, the way I see it, it makes sense that a heavily tailored message that is not properly targeted will not be effective in the non-targeted audience, right?
Yes.
So in the second study, maybe I didn't understand whether you showed the exact reaction of the audience to the properly tailored and targeted message, or if it was an average of the targeted messages, of the tailored messages.
I know these two words are like confusing.
Sorry.
Okay, party differences. We obviously have them. We control for like different accounts, but I honestly haven't explored them in this study. I have another paper where we look a little bit more about issue targeting, and there we see differences that smaller parties like the Greens and the FDP are a little bit more sophisticated than like the more older mainstream parties. I assume it's also the case here, but I actually didn't, like I don't have a graph for it ready or something like that. But yes, that would be probably a good addition for like maybe an appendix or something. And so what does this actually mean? So we don't have, so again, the dependent variable is impressions, so the predicted number of impressions. So in this data set, Meta gives us the ad, and then they give us the number, how many people saw this. We don't know if these people are fitting to the ad or not, or were in the target group or not. I think there are some studies that on average, the targeting works quite well on Facebook. I mean, sometimes you have a little bit of, like, if you target women, you normally get over 90% of your audience should be women. So I think it works fine, but we don't know. Like, we just get how many people saw this ad as a value here. Yeah, so that's a caveat of the data set, I think.
I see. Just to make it clear why I asked this is I think that the average, if you try to get the impressions of a heavily tailored message, the average would probably always show that the result is bad, because it will only have an effect on the properly targeted population, right? I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, probably, because the other ones find it a little bit too specific, right?
Yeah.
So I think this is maybe what we show here in this matched one, right? Because then both the targeting, so here, this is an ad where women are targeted and tailored, right? And maybe people in Berlin are targeted and tailored. And there seems to be an increase, but again, with only 19 ads here, I don't want to like interfere on anything. So yes, let's see if we get more data for this in the future.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to, if I may make a few comments or ask questions. First of all, you were saying that the parties in actual fact don't do a lot of targeting. And that may well be the case, although, funnily enough, the FDP got caught either for this election or the European election. I can't remember the details, where they were sending two different versions of an ad about climate change to different populations on Facebook that were mutually exclusive. So they promised a limit on CO2 for people on Facebook who were interested in, vegetarian food and animals and polar bears and all that sort of thing. And at the same time, they sent an ad to frequent travelers on Facebook that explicitly ruled out regulation and instead said we need innovation to deal with climate change. So, and this is one of the concerns about micro-targeting, that aside from its effectiveness in general, you can target and make mutually incompatible promises to different populations on Facebook, and people will never know for the most part. So I think, in addition to looking at persuasiveness, you also got to consider what other options for manipulation are out there. And certainly in Germany, the FDP got caught with that. So I just wanted to put that out there, and it's one of the reasons people are concerned about micro-targeting. The other thing is that you said the main dependent measure is propensity to vote for, a party, which of course is true. But one of the concerns about micro-targeting in particular that have been voiced is that you can use it to convince people not to vote. So to make sure people stay at home. And there's evidence that in the US, that was in fact done by targeting minority voters in particular in 2016. So I think in terms of measures, there are other ways in which micro-targeting can have an effect. And now turning to my question, I guess, this whole distinction between tailoring and targeting, I kind of thought I understood, but I'm no longer so sure, because to me, it just simply doesn't make sense to target an ad at men and then send it to women. I mean, how exactly does that happen in reality? I mean, it just, to me, it seems that what advertisers do and politicians is to figure out a message that they think appeals to women, and then they send it to women. Why on earth wouldn't they? So this is where I'm curious. And when you say here that the criteria don't match, can you explain to me how that's possible, that political parties would take the majority of ads, nearly 4,000, and send them to the wrong people? Seriously, they did that? I mean, that to me doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, so thank you so much. So there's a few things here. Regarding the FDP. So I agree, they do it sometimes. They try stuff out and send one pro environment ad to this group and one anti to the other one. I'm just saying that they are not using it as much as the media sometimes blows it up. I don't know where you got this from. I think might have been this journalist that kind of blew this up because they found this one ad where they did that. And I agree, they sometimes do it, but it's a really small number of ads. I also always try to look for it using for my examples, and I scroll through a lot of ads from German parties, and it's just a small minority. That's just the main message I want to put out there. It's just maybe an intern tried it out once, like that's really how it works. We also, like Simon also did a lot of interviews with campaign managers, and they basically also say this, like they they get backlash if they get caught, so it's not really worth it, like it's just not as used as much as often feared, so to speak. About the demobilization, so I totally agree. Demobilization is one way of targeting, right? Or and one effect that targeting can have. But I do think that we also kind of see this here, right? Because when I ask how likely are you to vote for this party, and we have a negative effect here compared of the non-tailored ad compared to the zero, that's actually like this demobilization effect, right? Like compared, of course, I could have also asked turnout. I agree.
Yeah, but now, hang on, now I have to connect to Konstantinos's question, which is, who are the people in that where you're pointing at right now, the three criteria in the bottom right?
Yeah.
Are those the people who met those three criteria only?
Yes.
Or
yes. So this
it is.
so this is now the experiment, right? And here it's the respondents got ads that matched them, right? So here, for example, it's a woman in Berlin who doesn't like immigration, and they got the ad, "Stop immigration, we stand up for women in Berlin." And then they didn't vote as much for the party compared to if they only got "Shape the future, we stand up for everybody."
Okay, right. So this is conditional. So you always matched.
It's always correct in this study. It's always targeted correctly.
Okay.
It's just about the tailoring, basically, right?
Right. Okay, that's interesting and puzzling because Fabio and I and a few others, we've got like 4 papers out now showing that micro-targeting based on personality works just fine, consistently over and over again. I mean, I've lost track of the number of times we've shown that. 6 or 7 large-scale experiments, and it's always the case that people find an ad more persuasive the closer it matches their personality in terms of the ad design. So this is in a sense the opposite result, except of course that in your case the person would know that they're being targeted in a sense. I mean, if I live in Berlin, I'm female and I hate immigration, and I then get an ad that is telling me all of that, then I can infer that I'm being targeted.
Yes. But maybe just one comment on this. So I feel like from the literature that personality works the best because it's probably also the the least clear one, right?
Exactly. It's furtive.
But still, if I got your papers correctly, you mostly compared 0 versus 1, right? You didn't have the more, the less.
Yes.
This is exactly what I try to kind of get over, because there are a lot of studies showing 0 versus 1, either positive, now negative, whatever, but not a lot of them combine various different things.
Yeah.
And I think your study, and this has been shown over on religion, on gender, on personality, that doing it on one thing works. But I think in the media we often hear that, oh, it's so specific, they tailor ads to how, like, very specific details, right, of your like various ones. And this, at least to this experiment, doesn't work. I would be very interested if you do one of your experiments on like a combination of different things in the future and see if it also like has a backlash effect there.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I wonder if it is the specificity or whether it is the knowledge of being targeted. Although we have one experiment, Fabio and I, where we show that telling people they're being targeted makes no difference.
I do the same. So it's only in the appendix because I also have another result. I had these two. So here there were personal information about your gender was used to tailor this ad to you, and here not, and it also doesn't make a difference.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
And also I have in the appendix some like order effect. So because you said they kind of can infer, right? but
Yeah.
at least try to only using the first ad, and it's the same result. So
Okay.
I
Thank
think
you.
it doesn't matter.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, one last quick question, Konstantinos. I have to run. I have another meeting in 2 minutes.
Yeah. It's not a question. It's about a hypothesis about this topic. Could it be the dependent variable that is the cause of this difference? That the intention to vote is actually a kind of difficult to capture measure compared to the ones from Steve's research?
Yeah, so I mean, here also use how much do you like the message, and you see here that this positive effect here is significant compared to the propensity to vote, right? So yeah, of course, like PTV is always harder to influence compared to just asking if you like the ad or something like that. But I still think that the backlash, if you do it very specific, is there for both variables. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Very interesting. Okay, I'm going to have to